This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Trail Interaction. What I'm looking at today is a trailer for a horror film called Rink. And this is interesting for me. First off, because it appears to take place in the 80s. And I can't speak for you, but I tend to really be bothered by movies that depict the 80s in particular. Because in my view, they do less than depicting a particular time period than fetishizing a particular time period. For instance, if you recall Stranger Things, a series on Netflix which I enjoyed for the most part, its depiction of the 80s for me rang false because it tried too often to draw attention to certain particular things that they did, be it a game, be it a piece of music, or whatever. When you're in a moment, typically you're not pointing out every little aspect of the moment, because then you're not in the moment. You're outside the moment, commenting upon it. And Stranger Things did that more often than I would have liked. It became a parody, in my eyes, a parody of the 80s as opposed to depicting the 80s. There's a fine line there. American Horror Story 1984. I've never been a fan of any of the American Horror Story chapters. I haven't watched many of them because after Murder House, I quickly lost interest. Primarily because it's not about horror. Horror is adjacent to what Ryan Murphy is trying to do with that series, and Brad Falchuk, I believe, as well. Horror is adjacent to what they're trying to do with that series. And when they had American Horror Story 1984, it was just more of the same. It was parody of the 80s. It was a Martian depicting the 80s. At least that's what it felt like to me. As I said, I find that irritating. And in the case of American Horror Story, it built on the qualities that I didn't like already. It's not about horror, not really. The stories are convoluted. They're not very interesting. So it made matters worse. What does that have to do with Rink? Rink appears to take place in the 80s. I haven't seen a trailer, but just from looking at the poster alone, that seems to be the case. Already, it's a mixed bag, because many movies just don't do it well. In any case, let's look at the trailer for Rink.
Did he call again?
3 times.
Oh, definitely doesn't sound
Well,
foreign.
what does he even say when you guys pick up the phone?
You think this place will close down?
It didn't close down when the kid died.
What kid?
He was epileptic. He had a seizure because of the strobe lights. Collapsed on the floor, and then got ran over by the speed skate session.
Where was the last place you saw Wendy?
She was out by the payphone. That's from a Halloween party a while back. Scared the hell out of the girls.
Who's that? Nurse Kara.
Well, that was the trailer for Rink. And initially, I gotta admit, I kind of enjoyed it. Though, as it went on, I'm starting to see the budget on the screen. The arrangements of shots are starting to come off a little low budget feeling to me, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself. Though it does dampen my enthusiasm for it a little. Now, what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Trail Interaction. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.